conduct the presidency has to be done in a dignified way with a level of class.
Do you believe Donald Trump can do that?
I don't think that the way he's behaved over the last few weeks is either dignified or worthy of the office that he seeks.
Well, Marco Rubio does not think Donald Trump is classy or dignified enough for the White House. But taking a look back at history, has anyone really needed dignity to be president or to host a show, for that matter? Here to debate, Brad Blakeman, former senior advisor to President George W. Bush, and presidential historian Doug Wead. Brad, I want to start with you first because I find it somewhat ironic that Marco Rubio is suggesting maybe Donald Trump is not classy enough to be president. Is it classy to even say that about a fellow Republican? We keep seeing this Republican on Republican violence.
Well, he's making an interesting point because Americans want their president to be presidential, to act like a president. Everything a president does, what he says, where he says it, who he says it to, the manner in which he says it, is all something that reflects not only on himself, but also the country. So people want to respect and like their president. And I think Marco Rubio is absolutely right, is Donald Trump has not acted very presidential to date.
Doug, what do you think about that? And as you go through history as a historian, I mean, George Washington and John Adams, for example, had much different personalities, still could be quite effective at the job.
Absolutely. In history, there's no question that performance trumps dignity. I mean, George Washington was dignified and a very successful president, and Ronald Reagan was dignified, a very successful president. But Andrew Jackson was a lout. He was from the West. People got drunk at his inaugural party. Men urinated in the corners of the East Room of the White House, but he was a great president. Abraham Lincoln, he dressed shabbily. He was uneducated. The charming stories that we all love drove some editors up the wall during his own day, but he was a good president. And one last example, James Buchanan dressed like a dandy. He was gallant, elegant. They say he took your breath away. When he entered the room, he was a terrible president.
Doug, I'm assuming you using the word Trump as a verb there was just coincidental, but I'll move on, Brad. I first met you, Brad, when you were working in the George W. Bush administration. I don't think there was any urinating in the Rose Garden, as we just heard. But George W. Bush, in all seriousness, had a much different, maybe, I don't know if gruff's the right word, but just sort of, roll up the sleeves, a little bit of the towel snapping in the locker room. Much different than Ronald Reagan, but I assume you would argue they were both effective.
They certainly were, and the decorum and the way that George W. Bush projected himself, not only as a person, but as a president, was in keeping with the Ronald Reagan and the George H.W. Bush example, and that is you must dignify the office. You must understand that everything you do is a reflection on that office. I'll give you, and you know this, Ed, he never entered the Oval Office, and nobody did if you're a man without a jacket and a tie.
That's right.
Women dressed accordingly. Everybody in the White House who came through those gates, who worked for the American people, understood how that place was going to be operated, and it was going to be with decorum and respect. And we didn't represent Republicans or Democrats. We represented every American. The president made that clear from day one.
Some very colorful analysis. Appreciate it this Sunday morning from Brad Blakeman and Doug Wead. Good to see you both.